Hey guys, I was going through the comments on my latest video, and if you haven't seen it, definitely go check it out. Now, I had this comment from Ledrew. Now, Ledrew was talking about matchups, and this is something I haven't really dived into yet. So I figured I'd make you guys a video talking about the basics of matchups. I hope you enjoy this educational style of content. Okay guys, before I get right into it, I just want to say that 60% of the people that watch my videos still aren't subscribed to the channel. So if you could please hit that subscribe button and hit that little bell, it would mean the absolute world to me. Okay, so what do I mean when I say the word matchups? Well, it's essentially what it sounds like. It's how you match up into an enemy Pokemon. How does your Pokemon match up against them? What are your strengths and weaknesses into the particular Pokemon and vice versa? It's really important to know this kind of stuff going into a game and to be able to analyze it throughout the game, because it doesn't stay the same. It's not a black and white answer. A great example of this is a Pokemon like Serena. Now, a lot of Pokemon have good matchups into Serena before it evolves into level 6, and then that quickly turns around and Serena gets the positive matchup. So I'll go into a little more detail about this. It's going to be pretty basic, as the basic ones are. I don't want to overload you guys with information, but this should give you a good understanding of what matchups are and how to kind of analyze them for yourself. Now, matchups are a perfect example of where micro gets turned into macro. Now, you need to know the micro of your Pokemon to know how it matches up in the macro, and that's something that's important for you to learn. You're not going to know how your Pokemon matches up if you don't know what it does, so please read your abilities. A lot of people don't even seem to know that Pikachu's Electro Ball has execute damage, meaning it does more damage when a target has low health. It's important to read the abilities to understand exactly what they can do and what your power really is, because power spikes are really important to know. Now, what's a power spike? A power spike is exactly what it sounds like again, a spike of power. A big example of this is something like Ninetales. When it hits level 4, it evolves and gets a stronger move. Another example being Lucario. It hits level 5 and gets extreme speed or power up punch. It is a drastic increase in power, and that is what you would consider a power spike. And it's important to know that not just on the Pokemon you're playing, but on all the ones that you're versing as well. Pokemon Unite is a MOBA, and a MOBA is a game of knowledge. Knowing what your opponents can do as well as what you can do is just as important. Let's go into another example. Say you're a Pokemon like Greninja. Greninja as a Froakie does not have good secure in the lane. Bubble can be blocked by an enemy Pokemon and it doesn't last hit very strongly. It has a few ticks of burst rather than one big one, meaning that most Pokemon are going to get that last hit over you. And that's why you don't tend to play this Pokemon in the lane. It doesn't match up well into other laners. Now, once you evolve to Frogadier, you gain another ability in the form of movement. You gain either Double Team or Smokescreen. This still doesn't help you too much in the lane. This helps you with mobility, which is why you're good out of the jungle. You're able to move really well, but it doesn't really help you in fighting or getting secure. Now, what does change is once you hit level 7 and you become a Greninja, you gain access to a move like Surf. Now, Surf is incredible secure and makes you very, very oppressive. That's why when you see a level 7 Greninja come to your lane, you get very afraid because it has access to Surf. It's hit a very powerful power spike. Though as this Pokemon, you need to be careful and be aware of your matchups. Now, if you're running Double Team or Smokescreen, both of those abilities are useful to help you avoid crowd control if you time it correctly. But if you aren't aware of a matchup into a Pokemon and you use them for mobility, you can get in a really bad situation really quickly. A great example of this is going up against something like a Machamp. If you're a level 7 Greninja and you go into lane against a level 5 Machamp, you may think, this is easy, I'm 2 levels ahead. But if you use your mobility to close the gap really quickly and you get hit by a dynamic punch, you are going to be wiped out by the Machamp and its allies before you know what hit you. It's really important to know what can happen to you to help you make the correct decisions. Another great example is a Pokemon like Lucario. Now, Lucario has one of the strongest early games in the entire game, but it does tend to fall off throughout the game. It's still quite impactful, though it does have some negative matchups. A huge example of this, like I mentioned earlier in the video, is Serena. Now, when Serena is a Bonsweet in the early game, Lucario just bullies it the entire time. It can barely get online. The problem is that once you go through those evolution stages and hit that level 6 power spike becoming a Serena, you are now the bully and Lucario has to be careful of you. It's really important to know power spikes to have the knowledge to be able to understand your matchups. I highly suggest going on YouTube and looking at gameplays of Pokemon and reading their abilities in the game, looking at a website like UniteDB, going around and just seeing what Pokemon can do. Try to memorize something that happened to you. so that it doesn't happen again. Try to learn as you go. Now, knowing a matchup is part of it, being able to identify is part of it, but using it effectively is where it really comes into play. Now, say in that scenario I was talking about earlier, you're the Machamp. Say now you've hit level 9, Greninja's also level 9. You're fairly strong Pokemon, the both of you. You know now that you have pick potential, meaning you can pick off that Greninja whenever it makes a mistake. If that Greninja uses its mobility for any reason that isn't your Dynamic Punch, you're gonna take it out. You need to know that you have the power to do that. But you also need to know that if you hit your Unite button and jump into 5 enemies trying to hit the big highlight play Unite, it's very possible that they're just going to unite you back and wipe you out, and you're just going to go down. When you see big plays like that on our streams, it's because we've thought about it before we go in. We see that enemies have used their cooldowns before we go in, which brings me to my next point. You need to be aware of when enemies use their cooldowns. If you're that Greninja in that earlier situation and you see that Machamp has already used their Dynamic Punch, then now you can safely use your Unstoppable Mobility move. You can use it to get closer or to get away because they don't have that tool to get you anymore. They've lost that power. They've lost that spike for that moment until it comes back off cooldown. Now, as I said, before you learn everything about every other Pokemon, you need to know what yours does and how it does it. Is your Pokemon an early game Pokemon, a mid game Pokemon, or a late game Pokemon? A good example of this is, say, Lucario is a really strong early game Pokemon. Serena really pops off in that mid game, but something like a Cinderace is crazy in that late game, incredibly strong. It's important for you to identify where you fit in. What are you working towards? What is your entire goal here? And what is your best matchup? Like what can you really do to emphasize on your matchups to make them better? Because just because you have a negative matchup into a Pokemon doesn't mean that you can't beat them. It just means you have to play it smarter. If a Machamp Dynamic Punches onto a Cinderace, that Cinderace is gone. But if a Cinderace Blaze Kicks off them as they're coming toward them and dashes away kiting them, they will then in turn win the fight. It doesn't go one way. You have tools to play around your negative matchups, and that's something that's beautiful about Pokemon Unite. Tyranitar is a bad matchup for any melee Pokemon. It shreds through your shields. It is terrible for tanks to fight, and it is so incredibly strong when it's going head to head with something. But if you play around it intelligently and you kite it around with your team, then it becomes less of a threat. It's important to play around the matchups once you learn them. Gengar is an incredibly strong threat when it's going head to head with somebody, but if they use their Dream Eater or Sludge Bomb and you avoid that move, Gengar is now a sitting duck and that matchup has flipped on its head. You are now in the driver's seat. You need to know what you can do and when you can do it, and this will help you improve your positioning as well. If you know you need to be wary of that Dream Eater coming from that Gengar, then you'll position it to be able to avoid it. And then once you see that threat come out, you can play a little more aggressively. You can get a little bit more tempo, and then you can reel it back in when you feel like that's coming back off the cooldown. It's really important for you to know your windows. I know this video doesn't explain too much because it's really hard to get into this topic without talking for hours and hours on end. Maybe one day I'll do a longer form video talking about this and it may be an hour long. But I hope you guys got the idea of how to decipher the matchup between you and an enemy Pokemon, how to figure it out, what you can do to analyze it on your own, and how you can capitalize upon that. You guys have been showing me a lot of love on these videos and it brings me almost to tears, and I couldn't express my thanks enough to all of you. So as always guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and have a wonderful day.